Bueno, muy buenas noches. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us for the second in a series of 3 events featuring encore screenings of videos from the 2020 Lit Luz Online Live Magazine Show. Pues bienvenidos todos a esta noche de Lit Luz en su edición online, que vamos a estar pasando una serie de proyecciones y de encores la noche de hoy. And well, as you probably know, the Lit Luz is a festival organized by the one and only Sarah Dodson with an amazing team. And it's all about trying to think and to build bridges between Mexico and the United States with collaborations made by artists and poets, dancers, filmmakers, people who write, journalists. So, well, tonight we're going to have a lot of people talking here. Tengo que decirles que el día de hoy vamos a tener todas las charlas en inglés. Entonces, bueno, pues esperemos que nos puedan acompañar en este idioma. And tonight, I want to tell you that we will be joined by Jessica Ann, Carla Faesler, Selena Trepp, as well as Eula Biss and Dalia Huerta Cano via a pre-recorded video. Well, to begin with, our first guest tonight is Jessica Ann. Jessica is a Chicago-based writer and performer and a non-fiction editor at Make Magazine. She is an alumna of the Neo-Futurist Ensemble and the author of A Manual for Nothing, edited by Noemi Press. She and Mexico City-based author Daniel Saldaña Paris first collaborated in 2018, presenting a bilingual, autobiographical performative essay that left the crowd in stitches. In Tough Year, Año Ojete, which I have to say are not exactly the same words, but anyway, we hear those autobiographical moments once again, but also see words sometimes replaced by movement, a reflection on the pandemic and more, and Saldaña Paris touch on the pathos that the 2020 brought to everyone. Well, now we're gonna see to this video, and then we're gonna have here Jessica to talk about it. Welcome you all. Let's see it now.
Preheat oven to 900 degrees. This is going to use up all of your energy. Here you are again, you, in the kitchen on the anniversary of our great nation's nativity. You are in the women's prison, baking. You read somewhere north of Scripture and south of C.S. Lewis that you had a strong desire to serve, to fill the home with the stench of burning sugar. You need to exist in a nice place somewhere below the men and above the children, offering up your labors to your love, gifting your crumbs to the tiny bastards and the destitute babies and the differently abled non-binary basically bitches. You are a white girl, naked, save for an apron and the strings of your IUD, wearing your night guard in the middle of the day so that you don't speak too much. Don't speak. Do as you're told. Make a list. 2.5 cups all-purpose flour, plus extra for rolling. 1 cup unsalted butter, very cold, cut into 1/2-inch cubes. The first thing you do before even think about making a butter-based pie crust is cut up the butter into cubes and put them in the freezer. The butter cube should chill at least 35 years and 6 presidents in the freezer. Also in the freezer, note the 3 abortions you had in the late 90s, one after the other, quietly, without hesitation. Your preferred method of birth control, actually. Back in the days when we were all young and you could get abortions for free in the Walmart parking lot, 2 for $1, 3 for a song, wrapped in plastic, sealed in a ball jar, nestled on beds of handkerchiefs and dried up carnations and name tags and journal entries for either David Sedaris or Gloria Steinem, depending on the gender assigned to your genderless sack of fingers and blood. Get rid of meaning. Your mind is a nightmare that has been eating you. Now eat your mind. Kathy Acker. 6 tart apples peeled, cored, and sliced, 1/2 cup white sugar, 2 teaspoons ground cinnamon, some help from the Russians, 2 tablespoons all-purpose flour, a moment taken out of your paycheck to say whatever you want with the nearest stone on the left side of your glass house. Build a barricade, dip your hamburger in mayonnaise. Life itself is the proper binge. Julia Child. 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon sugar, 6 to 8 tablespoons ice water, pussy pulp, fake news, pinch of sriracha, real money, a couple of fat jokes. Relationships are like fat people. Most of them don't work out. Brown sugar, a feminist, a narcissist, a hostess, cheesecloth, and a rabbi. Because you can't chase a waterfall any more than you can put the tinfoil back on the yogurt cup. But the flip side of the Snapple top says when wealth is passed off as merit, bad luck is seen as bad character. This is how they justify punishing the sick and the poor. But poverty is neither a crime nor a character flaw. Stigmatize those who let people die, not those who struggle to live. Sarah Kendzior. Dot apples with the remaining butter and the blood from your latest facelift. Put flour, sugar, and salt into the bowl of a food processor and pulse a couple of times to mix. Suffer from depression. Get your friend's dad to prescribe you oxy-cancer lubing opioids so strong you wake up under an overpass, stuffing needles between your toes, damning God, and worshiping David Foster Wallace like a schoolgirl in a strip club. You know that the mixture is ready if when you pinch some of the crumbling dough together with your fingers, it holds together. Be cautious with the amount of fentanyl you use to cut the dough. Too much and the crust will be tough. Nobody likes tough crust. You may find yourself suicidal or homicidal in the hours spent kneading buttermilk onto wax paper and caramelizing vitamin A into smiley face wedges. It's been a tough year. The president is a rapist and the vice president tells you what to do with your raped body. Pour yourself a glass of milk. Don't worry. Fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin. It's so potent that an amount the size of 3 grains of sugar is lethal to an adult. America's highest-ranking legal professional is more interested in protecting his boss than protecting the law. Bake in preheated oven on the baking sheet until apple filling is bubbly and crust is golden brown, 50 minutes to 50 years. Serve on napkins embroidered with Anne Lamott quotes. Deteriorate faster than your standards can lower. Eat alone, because you are alone. You are a lone, lonely, nasty woman wading through the rubble of your eggshells, crunching leaves in the cemetery while men in white houses pluck out pieces of your identity by the root and keep them out of your reach just because they can. Dust with lemon rind and sea salt. They keep telling you it gets better, but what they don't tell you is that it also gets worse. It gets dark and bitter, and no amount of apple cider vinegar can blanch the oily gasoline flavor from the roof of your cock-sucking pie hole. You're going to have to pull yourself together, but no. I came by these feelings honestly, and I don't accept bitter, wounded, yes, traumatized, sure, grieving, okay. Anything other than bitter. I put too much work in to be callously tossed aside as bitter. Bitter is for someone who hasn't earned it. Samantha Irby. Gently press the pie dough down so that it lines the bottom and sides of the pie plate. Use a pair of kitchen scissors to trim the dough to within an inch of your life. Take the pie to the window and watch it park outside the brothel with a basket and a bottle of port from the basement you saw on television. Score the top of the pie with 4 2-inch long cuts so that steam can escape. Can carry a passport and a hairless chihuahua because your mother raised you a lady and a liberty. Good thing you remodeled the kitchen all by yourself from a series of YouTube tutorials. Prison looks good on you, little girl. God bless you, and God bless America.
Conecta el tanquecito de gas al comal abollado y lleno de óxido. Aquí estás a pocos metros de un paso a desnivel en uno de los bordes de una ciudad sin bordes. Pica la cebolla en cubos minúsculos. A toda labor le corresponde un olvido inmediato y absoluto, así que repite varias veces para matar el tiempo. No va a pasar nadie, nunca nadie pasa por tu puesto de tacos. Mira la pared descascarillada del terreno baldío al otro lado de la calle y recuerda que en ese mismo terreno alguna vez arrimaste el fuego al foco y aspiraste como si no hubiera mañana. Recuerda esa sensación de plenitud, los pulmones hinchados de sí mismos y la súbita conciencia de ser indestructible que dura como mucho 2 minutos. Tira un poco de aceite en la parte hendida del comal, el mismo aceite renegrido que llevas 2 semanas reciclando. La barda del terreno tiene un rótulo que anuncia una clínica para adicciones. Recuerda las correas de cuero duro en el anexo, los baños de agua fría, el trabajo extenuante y sin paga cargando bultos de cemento. Echa un trozo de longaniza en el aceite y escúchalo freírse. Se parece un poco al ruido de la piedra borboteando en la panza del foco cuando das un tanque largo. Saliendo del anexo, volviste sin escalas al baldío. Calienta las tortillas sin que lleguen a quemarse. Viviste allá la vuelta hasta que un 15 de septiembre, día del grito, te levantaron dos policías por atracar una combi. Pasaste 2 años sin juicio en el Cerezo, barriendo las celdas de los ricos y luego de taquero en uno de los puestos del patio. Pica 50 limones y sirve la salsa que preparó tu esposa en el molcajete mediano. Te dejaron salir hace ya un lustro porque confundieron tu nombre con el de otro y ahora tienes un puesto por el que pagas derecho de piso a un hombre con lonjas en la nuca. Desde aquí puedes ver a los que van al terreno cómo entran y salen por un hoyo en la barda. A veces, cuando levantas el puesto para irte a la casa a las 11:30 de la noche, ves de reojo unos destellos en la banqueta como una constelación perdida y reconoces los vidrios de un parabrisas roto y por un momento piensas en llevártelos contigo porque algo que brilla así en mitad de la noche, con ese brillo extraño que cautiva, merece convertirse en amuleto.
Well, that was a tough year indeed. Jessica, welcome.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. We are super glad to have you here to conversate about this piece.
Yeah.
So,
Fun.
well, I mean, there's a lot of things that the piece made me thought about. But yeah, maybe to begin with, could you talk a little bit about this process of collaboration that you had with Danielle, who wasn't able to be here today? But how did you collaborate in this piece? And also, I don't know, could you say exactly like the context in which you created the piece? I cannot remember if it was during like this one pandemic year, or if it was before, or if it was related to this specific situation. But well, could you maybe to begin with, could you elaborate a little bit about those questions, please?
Yeah. So Daniel and I, we were pretty chill about this one because we were both so sad and languishing and so melancholy and down on our luck. So we sort of were looking at some writing that we already had lying around, and I've been working on some recipes. So a lot of the text that I was saying was written a little bit before the pandemic and sort of in the Trump era. And yeah, so we thought we'd sort of write about that time period. And not focus on any of the hope or the light, all darkness and sadness. So I had a pie recipe lying around, and he was like, "Oh, that sounds good." Like the form of a pie recipe or of a recipe in general seemed like a cool form to work with. That's what we did last time too. Was I guess I write in forms like that a lot, or like I think it's a cool constraint. So I had a how-to last time, and so then this time Daniel was like, "Do you have any how-tos?" And I was like, "No, but a pie." So then he read the pie recipe, and then he started from scratch. He sort of wrote his on the fly, but in the form of a recipe, and then he was like, I have a crazy idea. I'm going to my mom's house. How about I dance in the field? And I was like, oh no, I hate my body. But that sounded fun. So that was his idea, is sort of like dance. And I didn't want to dance. I'd rather just like come up with like a series of gestures to repeat. But then it worked good that like I had these like cold gestures, and then he was sort of going crazy in a field. So it kind of worked with the video, like for me to have like a phrase of movement and then for him to splice in like a crazy dance. But yeah, I mean, mostly we just talked about how sad we were and came up with something that we thought would be interesting.
Yeah, well, probably a sensation that a lot of people shares right now, and particularly in this situation, and well, particularly in the Trump era, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was thinking exactly. You were talking about this dance and your body, and yeah, I was thinking that you both were writers, but you had to develop this video in which you appear. So yeah, for me, one of the other questions I had is how was this for you, like writers, like generate this audiovisual document or piece in this area in which everything is so virtual and yeah, in which it's not like a performatic exactly, but it's recorded, so it's not alive, but it's a piece in which you read and you edit and you yeah. So yeah, I wanted to know what about that process and how do you feel about it? And I was also thinking that it was a tough year, and yeah, I mean the situations you talk about in your video are super hard, but also yeah, what I had like this question, like what happens after all of that? I mean, it is like a pessimistic view, or it's only like this tough year which can become in something better, or yeah, how do you feel about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what comes after the tough year is the dancing. I think we sort of wanted to dance in the rubble of the year, and that was like the moment of lightness, just to sort of do something uncomfortable with our body, and like I guess people dance when they're happy, so that was supposed to sort of symbolize a lightness, a happiness. But yeah, it's been hell this past year, having to like suddenly be a videographer. I've had to do it for some other projects, and it just takes so much time, and if you don't have that language or that skill set, but it's sort of like, so I do have a performance background, even though I don't like performing and it's not my happy place. And Daniel has done some performing. So I have a lot of experience doing uncomfortable things. I find it very hard to dance, very hard to sing. All of that is torture, but I still do it. And even though it's hard, it just kind of happens. So like that is my usual challenge. It's like, I just have to sing whatever, it'll be over. I'll just black out and I'll sing. And now I have to just black out and like make a video, like edit a video. It's hell. It's horrible. And like on stage, since I'm so uncomfortable on stage, I feel like all the blood rushes to my head and I just like scream it all out really fast. But that's not like very interesting on film. Wait, I'm reading this chat. Wait, did you ask that? Like screaming? Wait, what's happening?
Nothing's happening. Everything's.
Oh, I get it. It's like 5 minutes. Roll it up. Okay. 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
A lot can get done in 2 minutes though. So yeah, actually Daniel and I, we've become friends. Like part of the magic of Lit and Loose is what happens after you make these pieces. The pieces are so ephemeral, but then you're like integrated into this wonderful magical community with lasting artistic relationships. So it was just nice to be with an old friend and talk about what's going on and catch up. And even though the piece and everything we were talking about was so sad, there is power in getting something on paper and getting it out there. And it was nice to see him and nice to do something weird and hard and fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. I think it talks a lot about the spirit of the festival, and also it rises some hope in these dark times we're living. But yeah, thank you for being here with us. I don't know if you want to add something else to the piece, something we should know to your participation.
No, thank you, and we can do it. And it's nice to be together, even on this digital platform. I love you.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much. And now we're gonna have our next guests, which we're going to be or are going to be because Carla Faesler and Selena Trepp. Carla Faesler is the author of Formal, edited by Tusquets in 2014, which was named the best book published in that same year by La Tempestad magazine in its annual Presente de las Artes, edited here in Mexico. And also, at the beginning of the century, she won the Gilberto Owen National Prize for Literature. She lives and works in Mexico City. And also we have here the Chicagoan Selena Trepp, who combines installation, drawing, painting, and sculpture to create intricate setups of photos and videos. In addition to the studio-based work, Selena is active in experimental music scene. In this context, she sings and plays to create projected animation in real time at Visual Music. Carla and Selena first collaborated on the Lit Luz performance in 2018 when they were joined by the poet Nate Marshall. For the piece, live projections of Selena's animation spun across the stage and manipulated by a rotating mirror fell over Carla and Nate as they read a collaborative poem. In this video called Text, Selena's amazing animation and Carla's poetry reveal the story of a friendship, as told by the objects one leaves behind. Where we're going to see the video, and then we're going to be back with Carla and Selena.
Llevo años con Texto. Es la relación más larga que he tenido. Hemos vivido hasta lo indecible y nunca nos hemos separado. Una vez, con tristeza, me escribió: si esto se acaba, desapareceremos los dos. Hoy todo el día aluciné con las formas que tiene la mente de viajar fuera del cuerpo. Le conté a Texto y me dijo: yo soy una de ellas. Me gusta pensar en Texto como vehículo de lo invisible. La escritura es una invención que nos permite visualizar todo eso que intuimos y que solo a través de ella se materializará. Texto me dice que tengo que decidir entre escribir para el oído o para el ojo. ¿Eres sonido e imagen? Si no, ¿qué? Le pregunto. ¿Idea? Me contesta. Exacto. Reviro. Idea. No te distraigas, me dice Texto. Concéntrate. Eres un montón de piedras sueltas y quiero aventarlas, respondo. Sí, pero aquí, me contesta. Texto me dice: diviértete. El párrafo es un patio de juegos. Hoy es mi fecha límite y Texto escribe y luego borra. Cambia de idea y después se empeña en regresar a lo que ya había descartado. Ya nos veo abrazándonos y tirándonos juntos al vacío. Hoy es un buen día para terminar el documento, me dice Texto. ¿Qué es día?, le pregunto. Es una de las formas que la luz ha escogido para perder el tiempo, me responde. Tengo un retrato de mi madre que acostumbra a seguirme con la mirada, hábito que, como sabemos, tienen varios cuadros. Hoy le pedí que mejor expiara las letras de texto para buscar errores mientras hacía el café. Ahora, texto ya no quiere jugar conmigo. Ya tengo que terminar un proyecto y texto me ha llegado a trabajar. Lo malo de la voz es que rompe el silencio del texto, me dice texto. Lo malo del texto, le respondo, es que y me quedo callada buscando algo que cuerpo y mente al leer no puedan interpretar. Jalar a texto hasta que suba. Esa es una forma de volar un papalote. Hoy llegué a mi casa luego de no haber salido de mi casa. Como casi a diario, me senté frente a mi computadora en la mañana y texto, como siempre, ya me estaba esperando. Estamos escribiendo y texto, impaciente, me pide que accione su prótesis. ¿Qué? ¿Cuál prótesis?, le pregunto, y me responde, el oído. Apenas abro un poema que estoy escribiendo para corregirlo, texto me dice, me gustaba la palabra herida, cuando todavía no sabía bostezar. Ignoré todo el día a texto. Estaba algo harta por su insistencia en una forma que a mí me parecía conservadora, sin riesgo. Hace rato lo abrí sin ánimo ya de discutir. Entonces me dijo, cediste, y eso me decepciona. Esperaba que no me hicieras caso, porque tienes razón.
Well, that's a very incredible piece. I really like it, and well, I want to welcome Selena and Carla. Selena, Carla, welcome. How you doing?
Good.
Selena, do you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfectly. So, well, that's a very, I would say that's a very beautiful piece and interesting and thoughtful and profound. And yeah, I mean, one of the things I see on it is this relationship of the writer with the text and all this coming and going, and this voice of the text coming and going, and talking about the deadline, and yeah, and it's super interesting, and also it's something that I really like is that the video that Selena made is not exactly like an illustration of the text. Sometimes you can see like a woman talking, but then it changes and began to show like all kind of spaces and movements. So yeah, I wanted. I mean, one of the questions that always happens here is how was for you this collaboration as on the one hand, like writing about this relationship with writing, and then I don't know, you, Selena, how did you make like to translate this relationship of the text and the writer with to the animation and the stop motion? Yeah, to begin with, maybe we could talk a little bit about it.
Well, the directionality was actually kind of the opposite in the sense that it wasn't the piece that I made wasn't in response to the text. It was more a back and forth. So when I started to make the piece, it was more in response to my relationship to Carla. And I made a piece and then sent it to Carla, and then Carla sent back the text, and then I adjusted the piece to the text. So it was almost that was the process. But the piece was really inspired just spending time with Carla and we hit it off right away the first time we met. But the first time we met, Carla came to my studio and she left a comb in my studio, a red comb. And within my practice, the way I work, I have not worked with things outside of my studio for a very long time. And so it's this thing that people sometimes leave stuff because they feel compelled to. And I thought, oh, well, this is actually the perfect thing. If I'm going to make this new collaboration with Carla where we're not together in the same space, I have this comb and I'm going to break my rule and I'm going to work with something outside of my studio, which is, in essence, the stand-in for Carla. And so that's how the piece came about. So that aspect of it. And then I sent that to Carla, and then Carla was like, oh, this makes me think of this writing. I think then you should talk about what happened on your end, Carla.
Yeah, I have to say that the thing that amazes me the most about Celina's work is that she produces images that I have never seen, no? And for that, of course, since we met, we've been like linked together, connected some way, because we like each other so much and our work. And when I was thinking on what to do with her, of course, I know her animation work, and I chose and I rewrote things that had to do with the process of making the pieces. And because I think her animation is very much about that, no? Like looking around the studio, I knew that she only works with the stuff that is already there. And she's always thinking and rethinking, and her processes are already a piece of art for me, no? And so the text is about writing, the process of writing. And it doesn't tell anything. It's not a piece of fiction. It's just sending aphorisms, if you want, of how do you write. And text, with a capital T. Text is the character, the main character of the relato, of the piece. And so text is always talking to me, as I think all Celina's elements are always talking to her. She's always talking. She's like a maniac talking to the sculptures she makes, the mirrors in her studio, the hand, and all the balls, the strips. She's always in a monologue, a dialogue, with the elements of her studio. And that's the incredible thing about her work. More adding to her process of making, as I say, images that I had never seen. She's so original. She's incredible for me. Really, in the stuff you see in contemporary art and the art history that we all know more or less, her stuff is really not responding to any aesthetics trend, not any fashionable or had to do aesthetic, a visual thing. And you understand what I want to say, no? And so that's what amazed me of her, and that's why I choose this text that talks of the process. It's not as traditionally we do, writers and poets, telling something that everybody has done before, no? And so it's like kind of a new thing, I thought, talking about my quarrels and my fights with texts, and what I tell him to do, and he doesn't want to do that, and he's impatient with my writing, and he tells me you should do this or that. And so I say, no, because that's your crazy thing in your creative process. And I imagine, and I know that Celina is like the same with her stuff.
Totally. I mean, I think we both relate on form, right? That form itself is political and content in itself. So I think that's in both of our work very strong, and also, I would say, general outlook. Mm-hmm. And then it's interesting that I think for both of us, and that's where it connects, is that we sort of have this trust that it will just sync up. Like if you think in the same way you don't have to. I think neither one of us made a big effort of being like, we need to come up with a new thing. We knew that we could just kind of communicate, and then it would gel because we already, like, philosophically it works, and then it goes across media easily.
Yeah, for me, you see this piece of animation, and it's really like weird, no? At first, you don't know very well what's going on, and you hear this voice talking about writing and talking to an ether thing, no? And you see the images and the strange forms that Selena makes with her sculptures, and these animated, unanimated things, and I am so happy with the result because it's really weird, and it proposes something new. No, it's nothing to do with the eternal traditional language of art, which of course we all use, no, because we like to be or accepted, or we like to be in the group, no? but what I think of Selena is that she refuses, and that's her incredible vision, and that's her. I hate the word success, but that's her kneeling the thing, no?
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I try, right? We all try. It's hard.
Sí.
Well, yeah, it's good to know more about this process because, yeah, I really like the way in which sometimes, like, the narrative goes with the images. Sometimes they intersect. Sometimes they run, like, in parallels. But yeah, I like this, like, coming and going from the text to the image and what is happening there. And yeah, there are some elements also. I don't know. There is, like, I feel like this, like, reflection about the work you are doing, like this meta reflection, let's say. And yeah, I don't know if that's related literally with all these mirrors you use, for example, Selena. And yeah, I was reading that I just said, I think in the bios, that in your first performance you also use a mirror, like, to reflect this light. So yeah, I don't know if you could talk a little bit about this reflection of your own work in both the senses of the reflectiveness of the work, like, and also, like, the reflection of the images.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the use of mirror for me in my work is something that is very common in my work. I use it actually much more, not so much thinking about self-reflection, but more thinking about sort of the magic that mirror can do. And, like, literally, as far as, like, expanding space, doubling up space, bringing something that's above onto the ground. So I use it as this kind of practical analog tool, which is something that just interests me in general because it's something that everybody understands. Mm-hmm. Like, we've all looked at mirrors, but you don't understand it. Mm-hmm. And so unlike a computer effect, I could do a computer effect where you don't understand it at all and you won't be able to understand it because you don't have that experience. Mm-hmm. An analog effect, eventually, if you look at it long enough, you're like, oh, I understand that. And then that causes you afterwards to look at the world in a different way. Like, it opens up a portal into something magical that you have in your everyday, as opposed to something that's produced that's totally seamless. And so that's more my thinking about mirrors, and just in general, visual effects, that I try to create these kind of visual effects out of the everyday. Even, like, thinking about the comb as this thing that can make the shape, that can move it around, the potential of things. And I think that's the same thing and what I see with Carla, and the way that Carla works with language, but also kind of in sort of thinking about situating yourself in space and with people and in society. And then I think there's this kind of something I see in your work, Carla, strongly, that is, like, both totally in the present and in the here and in the now, but then connecting it to this other thing that is much more expansive, but in a way that feels really natural to me.
One of the things I most like in Selena's work is she has been talk about that, the mirrors, and how she takes images of her. For instance, you see the mirror and you see her leg, no, or her arm, and so she creates collage, no, in which she becomes part of the piece. She melts, no, with the piece, and I find it very, very interesting because it's like very, very political when you know that all that she makes and she puts her body in, no? It's only the things she has in her studio. I'm sorry to repeat that, but it's very important. And she is as well part of the material, no, she uses. And the collage are fantastic. I think that es maravilloso. And I always think that, reading images and reading text, so different. Text, it's a linear reading, okay? And the visual, the image, is a instant reading, okay? So it doesn't need time, whereas text needs time, like music, to reveal itself, no? And with her animations, Selena does that exactly, because sometimes the body of her forms are like letters, no? I imagine them sometimes as letters, and so when I see her animations, I am like reading as well, because the moving image, it's like music and text that needs time to emerge, no? To be born, if you want, no? And that's the incredible thing, because as you read her animation, no, in our piece together, you listen to my text, and so it's kind of writing at two hands, no? How do you say in English?
Yeah.
A dos manos, no? Entonces es increíble the relation, no, with the form of the way you perceive, no, the art piece, no. Mm-hmm.
Wow, I really love those specular reflections you just made. And well, I think I don't know if we should ask something else. How do we have the time, Sarah? Maybe yes, no.
Who's coming next to join us?
Well, I know I was just curious just like a super tiny question about something you said, but do you think we read the images, or do you think like in this like
well, well, many years ago, no, in the 70s, Barthes said, no, that everything was readable. You legible, no?
Yeah.
Everything is, you read everything. You read everything. Images, is the sculpture. You read everything. No, well, that's the way we analyze, and we but not in this semiotic way of seeing that, but in the very practicality of reading text or image. Is time, no? It's a question of time, and and that's why I am amazed, because Selena jumps into time, no? She wants to occupy time, no, with her animations, but giving us a visual language. So it's so interesting for me, no? It's incredible. Because in music you don't see, no? Yeah, and so I find it fantastic, and the result is incredible. You are really, really not only engaging in time with the sound of the text, but with I love cubismo, por ejemplo, because they hate, no, cubismo. What is that? It's horrible. No, a nose here, an eye there, and because they didn't understand until later that cubismo is movement. And when you see a cubista head, you are seeing the lady moving. Like sometimes my nose is here, sometimes it's here, no? So that's I love that kind of thinking all the time, no? And when Selena is such rich in interpretation, and it really gets you high.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Totally. I mean, some say like in a way, like painting is like an art of the space, and in a way, like narrative is related to time always. But I don't know, for someone like you, Selena, that do paints but also make this narrative, or I don't know if they are narrative yet, but or this time animations. What would you say about these distinctions? Just to finish with, just.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm like, oh, I have to get Carla to write my ordinance statement first off.
No, I'm always telling you, and now
I'm like, I never know how to talk about my work. I'm like, oh, this is perfect.
You have to send me everything because I have to write a text about you.
Please, yes, great.
Everybody is our witness.
Witness here, we know now. So the way I think about my work is definitely in regards to time, but much more so in regards to thinking about, with the animations in particular, thinking about affect, as opposed to sort of like processing through affect as opposed to through language. So that's the interesting part, and I think that's why it works so well with your text, is because I'm actually not thinking language based. I think much more about the way instrumental music, for example, creates reaction or affect through dynamics, through tone, through tension, and I have my language, which are my objects or my actors, that then act these things out. But I think much more about how do I create tension within the viewer, and how do I release it, and when do I want to create it, when do I want to release it, how do I let each actor, sometimes it's the object itself that tells me what to do in a way.
Yeah, because sometimes you cannot control it.
Yeah, and stop motion is a strange process because you start something, and I work improvised, so I don't have a script. So once you start a move, you kind of have to keep on going, and it tells you where it needs to go. And since I usually move many things, those things then affect each other, and then I'm suddenly in a pickle in a way, where I'm like, oh no, how do I get out of this? This is going to take me another 2 days and weird moves that I'm not into, but now I have to do it because I started it, and you can't just stop it because it takes months to do this stuff. So I think the improvisation part is also somewhat important, where I think of it as a language in itself. And so I improvise in there.
Yeah, and I know you're also a musician, so yeah, there is a lot of improvisation too on that field. But
it is, and I mean, and this is the way that I make music. I mean, I'm not a musician who plays an instrument, so I operate within the music world, but I've carved out a space for myself that allows me to play to my strengths, which is visual. Like, I mean, nobody would perform with me if it were just about my singing. That just comes with it.
Okay. Well, thank you to both of you for this amazing piece and this amazing conversation.
I thank you, Esteban, Sara.
Thank you.
Jessica.
Carla. Thank you.
Selena, I love you.
I love you too. I feel like you talk about me the whole time. I'm like, I want to talk about you. I'm going to have to make a show about you.
Well, and of course, let me not forget to thank Sara and Jessica and all our friends and guys that make this possible. It's incredible to be in touch after all these years, and I want to be buried with you.
Oh.
No, thank you so much, always.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for also letting us see all this funness in the festival, which is part of its spirit, I think so.
Yep.
And well, now we are going to our final conversation with the author Eula Biss and filmmaker Dalia Huerta. And this one was pre-recorded because Dalia lives in Norway, so we had to record this one beforehand. So I'm going to just read these bios, and then we're going to this video, to the piece, and then to the pre-recorded conversation. But, well, Eula Biss is the author of 4 books, most recently Having and Being Had, which Cathy Park Hon calls a revelatory and necessary primer on how late capitalism affects our daily lives. We should all probably read that one. And her book on immunity was named one of the 10 best books of 2014 by the New York Times Book Review. And well, also Dalia Huerta Cano is a cinematographer, editor, and director of documentaries and dramas. She has made several formal film studies in Mexico, the Netherlands, Germany, and Cuba. Her work has been selected for and won awards from film festivals around the world. Dalia and Eula first collaborated on 2019 with the short film Collector's Item. This piece, which was presented at Lit Luz, has since been screened in a number of festivals. The video presented tonight, Coming and Going, reunites this pair whose individual approaches to art making seem to be at home in their collaborative work. Well, let's take a look to that one. Thank you all.
Coming and going is a thing of the past. The revolving doors are locked. I walk around the block and around again. Do you miss the opening and closing, the sound of the shutter, the folding mirror, the velvet stop, the window of light cut to black? Once, by the ocean, I stood inside a windowless room to see what was just behind me. The ocean carried soundlessly on light into a dim interior, and the waves on the wall were upside down. Are we staying or leaving? Passing through a pinhole in time, our lines refracted through glass, reversed, so that now we want a future, something like the past. Are we speeding up or slowing down? The sound of the wheel turning, an easy trot, an anxious metronome, keeping time, the bearings of a bicycle, unpedaled, coasting. Does our sight have a set pace? The child asks. And I don't know. There are limits, I say, to light, to certainty, to the movement of the mind, to nerves and time. I don't know if we're coming or going, staying or leaving, but we're analog after all, moving at the speed of flesh toward that final empty window of light.
But maybe to begin with, I wanted to ask you about the way in which you collaborated. Also, because Dalia, you are like someone who works with the audiovisual and cinema, and Eula, you write. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about how was this collaboration for creating the video? And also because I know that you collaborated before in another of the editions of the festival with another video, which wasn't on these pandemic circumstances. So yeah, I wanted to ask you both, how do you work for those videos, and what was the difference for from the first time to this new experience?
Well, I'll start, Dalia. Okay. We collaborated differently these two times. So the first time we worked together, we started with the language and with some writing, and this time we started with images. Dalia, do you want to talk about the images?
Yeah. Well, last time Eula had the text first, and based on that, I made some images. And this time, I had some images I filmed in Berlin some years ago, and I couldn't find anything for it. And so then I just gave them to Eula and told her like, what do you think about this? And then in that she got inspired and she wrote the text based on the images I gave her. And it was actually, I filmed everything thinking about moving, and that's why it just came like the theme was already kind of in there in the images, and then she just created something new from that.
Yeah, I just watched Dahlia's footage over and over and was trying to respond to the rhythms of it and the texture of it, and trying to talk to it a little bit. But Dahlia also had a phrase that she said that the phrase that surfaced for her with this footage was coming and going. And so this phrase, because by the time I started working on this, the pandemic was here and we weren't coming or going anymore. So the phrase kind of had a new weight to it, a new resonance. When Dahlia first mentioned this phrase, I think you were laughing about it because you were like, this doesn't mean much, just coming and going. But suddenly coming and going meant a lot. And it was like, it somehow seemed to represent like so much of what we had lost in this year was coming and going. So there was also this new meaning emerged while we were working on this, because we actually started talking about this before the pandemic. When we were in Mexico City, you mentioned that you'd like to try another collaboration and you had this footage. So we were already, the conversation had already started, but then the conversation changed.
Wow, that sounds like a great way of collaboration. Probably it's super difficult, or when you receive some material and you have to create something about it, but it's also probably challenging in a way. And for me, I remember your first video, your first collaboration was much more about commodification, I think, about daily life spaces and all these IKEA furnitures and what they represent, and it was related to memory. And then I saw this one, and for me it was totally about coming and going. The doors are closed. There is a phrase at the beginning that says something like that, and for me it was like a reflection really about the situation we were living right now. But I don't know, how much did you think about that specific situation? And also, I don't know if you could talk a little bit about the kind of procedures you use in your work. For example, Eula, I saw that in the first video, you use a lot of like phrases from another authors, like appropriations. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, Dahlia, if you what kind of recordings you were like shooting, or what kind of shots you were using, or there was just like random material, or it was like for another project and then you use it for this one. How do you work usually, or maybe not usually, but for those specific videos, how did you make like your creations on the writing and on the camera?
Eula, you want to talk about the writing, and then I talk about the...
Sure, yeah. Yeah, for the first video, the collector's item for the first piece, there was a lot of, I think both of us were doing something that was a little collage-like. So the text that we started with was, I sent an excerpt from a book I was writing to Dahlia, and she underlined the phrases that were most interesting or exciting to her. And so we created together kind of a whole new text based on those. We were just pulling out parts of sentences and parts of phrases and quotes from other authors. And so this new text was really a collage of material that had appeared in a much longer text. And that was really fun and exciting for me to do with Dahlia. She's really skilled with language. And so it was very exciting to see a brand new text emerge from something that hadn't been new when I was working on it. It felt old, actually. And then the process was very different for the next one. It was I think I was just trying to kind of hear in my mind what the images were saying or suggesting, and initially a lot of like metaphors about cameras and film projectors came up, and Dahlia and I talked about that, and it was a little too literal the way that the words were interacting with the images. So we took some of the more literal metaphors out, or more literal moments, and it tried to push it into being more just suggestive and abstract. That was kind of what Dahlia was going for, was a more abstract feeling. And but there was something about nostalgia, I think, because of the moment we were working in, and this sense of a lost time, or the time that came before. And the footage is black and white, and it's actual film, which feels like a very nostalgic medium to me. So I think I was also kind of like thinking around nostalgia, and my own nostalgia for old photographic equipment was kind of showing up, like pinhole cameras and these very old, like large format cameras. And so that was going through my mind, various kinds of nostalgia as I was working on the language for that piece. What about the images, Dahlia?
Yeah, and from this last thing you said, I think this nostalgia was also about going out, no? Because we were locked down, and I think it was, even though it doesn't is about the pandemic closure and everything, it reflects our mood. I think it reflected a very nostalgic. So both videos have very different mood. They are very, one is like bright and white even, and the other one is more black and more like a little bit darker. But I really like that, because when I first read the text Eula sent me for collector's item, I was like, wow, like enlightened with her text. So it was very, very nice. This process was so fluid and so bright that I started like thinking on the images I wanted to put into these words, to contrast the text, and not to make it literally what it said, but to contrast it and tell something more, so something more than just the text. So then I just planned to film some things, but other things I just looked in my archive of footage. Like, for example, the earthquake in Mexico City. I was there and I was filming, and I didn't know what those images were going to be for. I still have a lot of that left, and I don't know what they are going to be for, but I managed to put together and contrast exactly what the text had nothing to do with an earthquake or something, but it has to do with property and consumption and spaces. And I thought it was like completely fitting in, and that's why I used this footage, and I think it worked. Yeah, it was more like a puzzle thing, and some other images I just thought, went out with my camera to the city, walking around, and with the text on my mind, trying to figure and connect images with the concepts I wanted to. The concept of the text, and how I feel like, oh, okay, this can be this, and I just filmed. And for example, with the colors, I was looking for graffitis and people walking, or bikes or something. I just stayed like choosing spaces, and in the difference with the coming and going one, back there in, I think, 2014, I went to Berlin and I just bought a cartridge of black and white film, and I started coming, in the mood I had in that moment was very nostalgic. Actually, I was a little low maybe, and I wanted to be alone, and I just went out to the city to the camera thinking on that, and the same, no, that I think the same people will do that in my films. I just have this feeling and I translate to the things I see, and I just film. And I filmed that, and I could never, I just had it there, and I could never give a voice to it. And it was very sad in a way that I couldn't take it out. And I had this, like, like to do things for all these years. I had these images that I knew I wanted to do something with it, but I never got inspired to do anything. So then in this time where we were locked down, and I thought, like, I have some images I really want to use, and I so love how Eula writes, so why not make this collaboration now? And I showed it to her, and she liked the images. So then, wow, it was like a perfect moment to use it, and I think it quite worked very well.
Right, and it was actual. Sorry, was it actual film? Like película? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Super 8 film.
Oh.
Yeah,
wow.
I bought the film, I filmed it, and I developed it in the same trip. So I got the film developed back to Mexico, where I just put it in video, and yeah.
Great. Sorry, Eula, you were going to say something?
Oh, just that I loved that footage from Berlin. I thought it was so beautiful. It was such a lovely experience to watch it over and over again. My only problem was that I didn't like anything that I wrote to go with it. I liked the images so much, and I found them so lovely and dreamlike that anything I put next to it didn't look good to me. And so I had to go through like some self-loathing around that, Dahlia was like, no, I think this is fine. And I was like, it's terrible. It's ruining your film.
No, it actually, I think it goes like very good.
I think
the mood is very similar as well. And so it's like, yeah.
I came around to it. I got used to the words.
No, I think it really worked. It really worked out, and yeah, there is something, definitely nostalgic. Maybe because of the quality of the image, and also like the mood of the voice, which is your voice, right, Eula? Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it has that spirit, but it's pretty awesome. So yeah, I think I like this idea that you were talking about how it was like a collage, and how also it doesn't have to be like this kind of illustration, like a direct correlationship between image and words, and is pretty awesome. And I think also this kind of works you created reminds me a lot to the works of certain people who explore cinema, like using the essay form, just like Chris Marker or Agnes Barda. So yeah, I think there is something of that spirit in your works. So yeah, well, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for both of you for joining us for this conversation.